Protecting our kids on the internet and on computers should be a high priority for any good parent. The problem is, how do we do that without excessively tracking and utilizing various resources which are sending every one of our children's activities onto some centralized database? Should we be having the accountability type software or blocking software? And what are the best defenses to protect your kids on the internet? Well, Linux does have a few little answers, and we're going to dive into the state of parental controls on Linux in this video. Thanks for making it back to Switch to Linux in the new year, and I hope that this video is a wonderful overview of something that has been in Linux for at least a couple of years, and in a way that many of us didn't even know existed. And so I first spotted this on my Zorin 17, was it 17? Whatever the last Zorin release was. I spotted this and said, I want to look deeper into this. And I looked deeper, and let alone what I found is that just like most of the other new features in Zorin were simply additions to the GNOME desktop. And that also goes true for the parental controls. Now, as we dive into this, first we have to address a few different questions. First and foremost, is there any silver bullet that's going to help? And the real answer is there's not. Some people take precautions with their kids and technology. Those are the good parents. The people will look at this and say, look, I want to have a computer. I want my kid to be able to have access to a computer, but I want to have some general safeguards in place. This is good. There are some detractors to this general viewpoint we will see here. But if you are on Linux, there are indeed a few options that are starting to roll out, and they are options in places that in the past I've looked at and said, I don't know, but the desktops are becoming a little bit more intriguing, shall we say. At the end, we are going to talk about the best, though still not perfect overall solution. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video for that. So with that, let's go ahead and dive on in. And we want to talk first about the quick summary of the parental controls inside of Linux. Now, I first spotted this in Elementary OS a while back. And despite having a lot of not necessarily the best opinions and views of Elementary OS on a technical level, the one thing I've always praised Elementary OS for is the fact that they have good parental controls, which include times that the kid can use the computer, specific applications that they can use, and some other restrictions that you can do. I still do not see this level of parental controls most other places, although it is currently in the plan and in the works. So stay tuned for that. Of course, I saw the Zorin parental controls announced, and this actually has to do with a change in GNOME 3.38. And of course, we are at 45, I think. So this has been put into the GNOME system right around the time of the global situation, shall we say. And maybe that is what overshadowed it. Or maybe not enough people care about parental controls inside their operating system. And so not a lot of people talked about it. But as Zorin was rolled up to a more modern version of the desktop, then they're starting to basically identify all of the things. And this caught my eye, and I looked at it and said, well, hey, there's like age restrictions on installation. It's like, where did all this come from? Why did I not hear about this before? And so I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into this. I wanted to ask questions. Do the major Linux distributions have these capabilities? So if you do want to run Linux in your home and you want to be concerned about some degree of parental controls, where might you go to look for those parental controls? We want to address all of those different factors as we get into it. So let's go ahead and get into the more detailed section. First and foremost, we saw an article from Fedora magazine that talked about Fedora and parental controls. And what we saw in this is there is certainly some positive movement in this. Now, like Elementary OS, on Fedora, you create a non-administrative account, and on that non-administrative account, you have the ability of parental controls. The reality is this is something that has been built into the GNOME shell. So if you are looking for this, you're going to use something that is either GNOME or Budgie, something that is dependent on GNOME shell. Now, what I could not verify, and maybe somebody in the comments can, I could not verify is the parental controls on elementary OS, is this something in the OS or is this something in the Pantheon desktop? Now, I did attempt to ask this question. I attempted to resolve it. I tried to install Pantheon on Debian, but of course, one of my everlasting criticisms of elementary OS is they do not like people doing things that are not exactly the way they want to do it. And so all of the ways to install Pantheon on Debian have since been blocked. I tried to install it on Arch and I get non-functional systems. I did not try I believe there is a Pantheon Fedora branch. I don't have a copy of that. And so I didn't get a chance to play around with that one for my initial test, but I tried several different VMs to try and get Pantheon working. I don't know if the Pantheon itself has the parental controls or if it's elementary OS that does, because those are two slightly distinct things. But in the case of Fedora, they're talking about the GNOME shell. As of GNOME 3.38, there has been a package available which is called Malcontent. And that package allows you to use parental controls with GNOME systems. So any desktop environment running GNOME after 3.38, you will have the capability of running parental controls. That means pretty much any modern Linux distribution with the GNOME desktop. I also did check on my Debian video, and indeed, Debian running the Budgie desktop also has this because, of course, as of right now, the Budgie desktop requires GNOME shell, and so anything involved in GNOME will also be working in there. I did not find any evidence of any form of parental controls in any other desktop environment. So if you don't really like GNOME, as I personally, it's not my forte, then I'm not really, I don't have any other options. Good thing I don't have anybody that I'm specifically trying to have parental controls for. Now, they talk here about the admin rights and they talk about the application here. So this is actually the parental control application. You would have seen this in my Zorin video. When you have a user account that is not an administrator, you can restrict the web browsers, you can restrict the application, and then look at the application suitability. This is actually for ages. And this works because there is a meta tag in Flatpaks that allows for sorting by metadata. Now, I did double check on Linux Mint. Since Linux Mint does use a lot on the with the Flatpaks, it does not actually have the age restrictions or even displays anything about the age metadata, but the GNOME Software Store does. So if you go to the GNOME Software Store, you will see a section for age rating, and it goes a little bit further in not just saying, hey, this is the 10 years or 13 years. It tells you exactly which categories, which makes it, for me, the best approach to do. Because you might not have a problem with violence as much. You might have a problem with sex or drugs. All of these things have a distinct separate category inside the Flatpak metadata. So as a parent, you can look at that piece of software package. You can analyze based on the metadata to say, okay, these guys may smoke some cigarettes and say some bad words and then kill a bunch of zombies. Okay, I don't care about the killing the zombies, but I don't really want them to do bad words, so I can block it out. So the right panel here under the restrict applications, everything in this application strict has to be tied to Flatpak. And this is where Fedora has made some of the best inroads in this direction, because you can get every package available on Fedora you can get as a Flatpak with the Fedora's way of doing Flatpaks. And they worked on this in line of the Silverblue immutable desktop. Because if you look at the Silverblue desktop, they have the ability to install something that you cannot install non-Flatpak software on, but it still has the full range of software available to Fedora, which means everything you can input on Fedora Silverblue, you can control if your child has it. And then, of course, they can't control and they can't install anything else because it's the immutable system, and that's the issue. But that brings us to the downside of this is you must be using Flatpaks. Now, technically, the Malcontent package, at least in one incarnation, had the ability to sort out non-Flatpak software as well, but I could not find any reference to that in the current incarnations of the software, and the software is now about 3 or 4 years old at this point in time. So I think it was just easier to rely on the meta tags of the Flatpaks to get everything in there. And effectively, anything that is a Flatpak on your system, you can restrict to the children's account. So that really is our issues. Now, here is actually the Malcontent package here. And the Malcontent package, this is put together actually by the guys at Endless. And what their goal was is just to have a good design filter to say, hey, for the people that want some restrictions, we will have that. Here's actually the goals. Some of these are not currently active. Now, the one thing that is not currently active is screen time limitations. So first thing they do is they went through on Windows and they went through on Mac and they looked at some of the apps available in iOS to see how are they managing these. And then they wanted to have a discussion to say, we want to do this. Now, this is where Elementary OS has figured it out. Elementary OS, you can set a bedtime. In GNOME, you cannot yet do that. Remote monitoring, either through an app or a different device or web page, by email, I have not seen that anywhere yet. And honestly, I do not and would not want that, because that means that the information, the metadata going on is being put somewhere else and stored. I think that is a privacy violation. I am more inclined to want a blocking function than I am inclined to want a tracking function. And that really is important, unless you are tying that tracking function explicitly and exclusively on your own home network. And then per application usage limits, that is in there as well. So they have some of their plans here. We're going to open all these guys up. So this is your initial system setup, which is just kind of discussing how things are running. And this is just basically setting up GNOME. So there's really nothing in there that's relevant for us. As far as the users, in order to use your accounts inside of this is Windows and Mac. So they're kind of, you can see they're kind of trying to follow some of the processes of Windows and Mac. Also, I'm not a huge fan of. As far as parental controls, this is what they have. Now, eventually they want to have this screen time in here. So you can see what the screen time is. You can limit the daily usage. I like that functionality, but it's not available yet. These are all mock-ups. What is there is restricting applications, restricting installing, and setting your application suitability. You can set specific restrictions. And here's the iOS, and then here's your Mac. This is your timing, but what they wanted to do is they wanted to develop effectively this, have a separate screen time section so that you can see and monitor the screen time. This is not currently functional. So they're still working on this. We don't have this. I did double check the latest version of GNOME, just installed on Arch today. And yes, screen time is still not capable in here, but every other function happens to be there. Now, we say that these are good approaches. There are certainly the detractors. This is Baron's HK's rants. I'm going to say this is Baron HK's unhinged rants. This guy is an absolute lunatic, putting parental controls as violations of human rights. This guy must be a huge advocate of Richard Farson's birthrights, which alleges that children should be 100% autonomous individuals, free and devoid of any restrictions on their life and liberty. And if you happen to have children, you know how insane that is. If you do not, and you do not have children, I would just encourage you to watch The Lord of the Flies and see what happens. All right. But that being said, this guy basically has this boldened out, unhinged rant about how bad propriety is, and even has this in here. You know, I couldn't tell you if they work, but it's funny that Microsoft has one since Bill Gates was palling around with, yeah, that guy. Interesting. This is completely unhinged. I actually think the best part about this article is the comment by Privacy Matters. Are you high, or were you when you wrote this? I did read the whole article. It is a hoot. We're not going to take the time to read it here because it's not relevant. Just understand that there are some detractors. Other detractors, though, appear to be Ubuntu. Now, for the reasons that we've already discussed, Ubuntu in the latest incarnations, the current versions, are explicitly not shipping with Flatpaks and not supporting Flatpaks, and even telling their community builds, hey, you can't necessarily support Flatpak either. And because Flatpak is a requirement to get these parental controls to work, I did go ahead and boot into the latest version of Ubuntu, and indeed the parental controls are absent. Now, what we are seeing here is there is some discussion from Canonical about this parental control integration in Ubuntu using the Malcontent package. And so there's some discussion about how this is going to work, but the last bit of discussion of this ended out on the 20th. They do actually have in the Ubuntu 23.10, so brand new release, they do talk about adding parental controls, but notice it says parental controls require application via Flatpak or FlatHub, which Ubuntu explicitly does not support, and they came out with documentation prior to the 2010 release saying they're not going to support the Flatpaks. So when I logged in, this is not here, and the reason happens to be if you go back and look at the Malcontent package, you'll see that one of the dependencies of it is indeed Flatpak. So since Flatpak is not installed on Ubuntu and they explicitly do not support it because of their snaps, which snaps do not have any age restrictions that I know of. To be honest, that's not something I dug into, but I don't remember them having any. But because Flatpak is a requirement and Ubuntu has come out with an anti-Flatpak stance, Malcontent, it would appear, is not installed on their system. And indeed, that is what I found. But if you do check the documentation, they do have parental controls in here, which you would probably have to install Flatpak in order to access at all, even the application restrictions, the browser restrictions. It looks like you need to install Flatpak and probably install the Malcontent package as well. And if you try to install Malcontent, it'd probably install Flatpak as well. So I'm not sure why they have the information here on a package that's not apparently available by default, but that happens to be what their stance is. So that is our details about where it is. And now I want to talk about some general insights that I personally have. And I have 4 primary points about this that some people may agree or disagree. First and foremost, I do disagree with the unhinged rant that saying I want to take some active steps to protect children as being a violation of human rights. Now, to be fair, he goes through, and at the bottom of his article, he basically talks about how his parents tried to restrict him from viewing bad stuff on the internet, and it didn't work. And I guess, therefore, let's go ahead and wave the white flag of surrender and not do anything at all to protect our kids and just let them live in Richard Farson's land of insanity, which is not looking too much different than these modern days, no matter what. But regardless, the fact that parental controls is not going to 100% block it is not the point. The point is you want to do the best job that you can to do the best you can to protect your kids. It's not going to be 100%. Again, we're going to get into what I think is the best thing that works here down at the very end. But I want to make 4 points. Number 1, I really like GNOME's approach to this. I think it is a really good way, especially since, unlike Unhinged Rant Guy here, it is not something that is forced on users. It is not something that's like, you're installing this system and you can't use anything. No, it simply is something that you cannot even use it until you add a second and a non-administrative account. You have to and even when you do that, it's still not explicitly activated. You have to add the account, you have to explicitly go in with your administrator account, and you have to explicitly assign the restrictions you want to do. Nothing goes on the internet, there is nothing else, and there is not even a log of what is attempted to do, which means this is the absolute 100% best way of doing this. But it's not perfect. The number 2 point here is that with Flatpaks, we actually get information that is useful for parents. I think this is good because some parents have a bigger problem with alcohol and drug content than they do with violence. Other people have a bigger problem with violence than they do alcohol or drug content. I think a lot of this just deals with the certain proclivities of individual people. You know, if you happen to come from an alcoholic background and you want to take extra steps to prevent your kids from being perpetually exposed to alcohol in all environments, including their video games on Linux, I think that you should have the freedom to do that. And the fact that the Flatpak metadata deciphers this. It doesn't just say, oh, we think this is for 13 up. We think this is for 10 up. It gives us the reasons for the various ratings. So you can go in, you can look at the individual software package, and you can make an individual decision. That is exactly what the people were asking for. If you go back, I did a book called I Am Not Amused. It's one of my Christian books on Christians in media entertainment. And I'll put a link for that book down in the description here if you're interested in checking it out. In that book, we did a ton of research. It's my most researched book. We spent 4 years doing the research on it, hundreds of different references. One of the things I did is I dug into the Tippa Gore and Frank Zappa debate about parental guidance on music and things. And back then, the big approach is, hey, all we want is some information about what is there so we can make our decision. You see, we didn't have the internet back then. We couldn't say, what's our latest thing? And we're going to go ahead and search it up on the internet and see what the lyrics are. In fact, I had a neighbor whose son, he was a little bit younger than us. He was probably 10 at the time. And his older half brother was listening to Motley Crue. And that was the year that Dr. Feelgood comes out. Well, there's a song on Dr. Feelgood called She Goes Down. And She Goes Down is about things you might expect it to be about, with such a title on a heavy metal band that opens with a zipping of a pants and a girl laughing. And so the mother, she was actually a good involved parent. She listened to the whole album. She took the whole album and she listened to it. And then she said to the stepson, make a copy of that album for him, but exclude that one song. So he did. So the kid got a chance to have an involved parent. He gets a copy of most of the music some of us were listening to. Now, did he have this deep inclination to go and listen to that other music wherever he could? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I really don't know. All right. But the fact is that information is what we need. We don't need explicit control. We don't need people silenced, but we want to have the information that is available, because with available information, that is what makes the best informed decision. So I can decide as a parent with information what is appropriate and what is not based on what I know about my kids and how involved I am in their life. So I think that the flat pack approach combined with this package is spot on. I think it's exactly what it needs to be. Number 3, this application is super easy to control and disable. So unhinged rant guy aside, no, this is not something that is forced upon everybody. It is something that is there as a tool for parents who want to be involved. And those are the parents who want to be involved will generally have the best kids, as long as they're not so overly involved. You gotta have a little bit of flexibility, but you can't just be like, hey, whatever, you don't want any of that. And of course, this is not the silver bullet, but it does have a role. And this is going to get us into 2 pieces of bonus material. The 2 things I think you can do on your system. If you have kids and you are concerned about them accessing things that you do not want them to access without your express consent, the first thing we need to do is on the technical level. You're going to want to run an immutable system. We did a video a few months back, I think, on various immutable operating systems. The thing about the immutable operating systems is that the core system packages don't change. All of the software is manipulated with Flatpak, Snap, and things like that. You want to have a system which is explicitly Flatpak, which utilizes these parental controls so that no application can be installed without you knowing what it is and having the ability to do that. So we're talking about probably something like Fedora Silverblue, which is an immutable system which has a wide range of Flatpaks available and has all of these parental controls out of the box. But you need to take one extra step, and you need to password protect your BIOS lock on your computer, and you need to make sure your computer is set to only be able to boot on the main drive. So you're going to exclude the possibility of your kid getting a flash drive from his friend at school, coming home, and when you're not there, plugging the flash drive in and booting into whatever operating system he wants. Now, that is not foolproof. That is not the silver bullet, because you can still, I won't tell you how to get around that. It's fairly easy to get around. But you can get around it, but that's going to block most people who are not necessarily computer competent from getting into the system. That is still not the best approach, though. It's not the silver bullet. The best overall approach, which is still not perfect, is to have a good relationship and good communication with your children. Okay, I always look at this type of software as some of the software is passive and blocking, some of the software is accountability. I first and foremost do not believe in having any form of accountability or tracking type software without having a communication. I think there's a place for it, though. You have a young teenager, you should have a conversation. Say, look, the internet can be a dangerous place. I need to make sure I know where you're going, and we're going to set some safe boundaries. You're not to look at this site, this site, this site, and we are going to install a software package to make sure that you don't go over there. and I'm going to get a reporting of those. If you have that type of software, that type of monitoring software, it needs to be something your kids know about. Because if it's not, you're going to lose their trust, and you need them to trust you. All right. Now, I don't like the accountability software as much because it's sending data to third-party servers. I like this approach of blocking this down, like what this package is doing, what the Malcontent package is doing. And I like the overall approach that parents can go and have a conversation, you have a relationship, and you have this open ability where they know they can ask questions and you can have all those things dealt with. That is your overall best approach to do. So we're going to wrap this one up here. Hopefully this has been helpful. Let me know what you think about this content, this format, and things like that. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments down below.
Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.